If you eat plant-based and gluten-free, I wonder, do you have a protocol for basic cookies? I can share one. But before I do, I want to talk about different cooking styles. It would depend how we make those cookies, because we have different styles and we either live in a meals household or in ingredients household. I didn't know that until I started to work as a nutrition teacher and coacher. I was really surprised, like why some things that are so easy for me are difficult for my clients and students. And some things that they would do, I would never do. Like that for me was too complicated. And I would try to suggest them more simple ways to cook, and they would come back to me saying, no, I don't find that it's more simple. It's more complicated to me. That was really funny until I realized what is happening. And now I learned my lesson. So those different households, how are they different? This concept comes from, to my knowledge, and correct me in comments if I'm mistaken, to my knowledge it comes from Tamar Adler. She's a chef and also she's a food writer. She talks about this in her book, An Everlasting Meal, Cooking with Economy and Grace. Adler describes how some kitchens operate like ingredient households, where people cook from what they have, versus meal households, where people shop specifically for meals. It would be interesting to know what household do you live. Once you know which house you are, it becomes much more easier not only to understand your style of cooking, but also to communicate with other people. Sometimes we may have conflicts about food and buying groceries, planning meals for children. Those conflicts are sometimes based on those differences. We assume that our style of cooking is kind of universal, which is not. Once you know which household you are from, everything about cooking makes so much more sense. What are the differences? In a house of meals, food preparation is an algorithm. You decide what you want to cook. Let's say to bake cookies. Then you either know recipe, or you go to recipe book or online and you find the recipe that you like. Then you check your kitchen, your fridge, your cupboards for ingredients. Most likely you don't have all ingredients that you need. You go to the shop. Maybe in the first shop you will not find all ingredients that you need. Then you go to another shop, you come home, you follow the recipe and you prepare cookies. In the house of ingredients, we would not treat meals as fixed things. For us, it's more like a flow. So that means that we can switch ingredients, we can skip some ingredients, we can add some different ingredients. No rules, there is kind of the vague instruction. We do not treat this instruction as a very strong rule. So we would also open the fridge and cupboards, and then we will see what we have and we will go from there. It may sound chaotic, right? But it is not, because all products always have some connections. When we look at the product, we usually would see different options of that product. So for example, sweet potato. We can roast potato with other root vegetables, we can use it in a warm salad, we can use it raw in a salad, we can make potato soup together with carrots, for example. We can make a cake, we can make cupcakes, chips. There are so many ways of using sweet potato. So potato would tell us what to do. And some houses are mixed. Different people cook in the house, or there's the difference between the weekdays and the weekend. So maybe on weekdays there's more like a meal house, and then on weekends people are more relaxed and they improvise in the kitchen. Or during the weekdays it's like how it goes depending on the ingredients that we have, and on weekend we look for recipes and we follow recipes, prepare something very interesting and beautiful. I noticed that meal households are more common in countries and cultures where culture is deeply centered around the food. That would be Spain or South Korea. I just recently came back from visiting my friends in Spain, and we talked that, for example, paella, it could be paella with vegetables, but there is a specific list of vegetables that could be included in paella. And if you start to add some crazy stuff to paella, that would not be paella, that would be rice with stuff. The same in South Korea, for example, japchae. It is the way to do it. It may be japchae that I prepare at home for my Korean friends will not look like a japchae, and I totally respect that. In ingredient household, meals usually have no names. They are just combinations of things that we came up with. So let me tell you how we ended up with those cookies. Gluten-free, plant-based, 2 ingredients, basically 2. I was spending holidays with my family. When we meet my sister and my younger sister, who is technically my niece, but also she's my sister and my teacher, we usually want to have something very traditional, the food that we had when we were kids at home with my mom. Potato pancakes, one of those top dishes that we crave all the time. And my sister is so generous, so she prepares them, she bakes them. And nobody in the world bakes potato pancakes as delicious as my sister bakes. For potato pancakes, we need a dip. And usually in our family, we would have cottage cheese dip. It's very soft cottage cheese mixed with milk, a bit of salt, sometimes dill. So it's not too sour, not too salty. It's light, not too thick. But we are not into dairy products now. So usually we replace it with something. We could go to the shop and then we could buy, I don't know, yogurt or some plant-based alternative, maybe tofu. Could be different but similar texture. We can make similar dip from tofu. But in a house of ingredients, you do not go to shop. So you have to open cupboard. You can make very similar dip using pumpkin seeds. Take pumpkin seeds, put a bit of water, blend them, and then add some spices or maybe dill or whatever you want, a bit of salt. I found pumpkin seeds, but they were not enough. And also I found cashew. I used cashew nuts for the dip. Cashew nuts have sweetness. I added salt and more salt, apple cider vinegar, and what else? Water and dill. Yeah, so I blended everything, then added dill. And it was the dip. And because I come from the house of ingredients, I never measure things. So I made quantity of the dip was too much. And it stayed in the fridge for the second and for the third day. Other members of my family, they don't like to eat the same food over and over. So I knew that this dip is, that's it basically for the dip. So I wanted to somehow use this dip for something. One of the ways to use nuts, if you have something that you made from nuts and you don't want it anymore, is to use it for cakes or cupcakes. But we just recently had cake, so that was not the option. But cookies was the option. But I didn't want to make cookies sweet. I just wanted to make them maybe more like crackers or the digestive biscuits. I don't know if I'm calling them rightly, but the biscuits that are not sweet. So I mixed this dip that was cashew, salt, vinegar, and dill with a bit of gluten-free flour. Gluten-free flour, it's a mix of things. And then I baked them for half an hour in 180 degrees Celsius. Yeah, and they were fine. They were fine. They were actually a bit sweet, even without any sweetening element, like no dates, no maple syrup, no honey, because sweetness is in the cashew. But they were like okay sweet, it's not too sweet. You could try this recipe next time when you will have dip that you will make from cashew, and maybe if you make too much of it, then you can mix it with the flour. This is the way to use leftovers. When we live in a meal household, it looks like more efficient, right? But usually when we buy something for the recipe asks for 3 spoons of something. But when we go to shop, we will find a bag of something, and then we bring this bag of something home, and then we keep it in a cupboard without using it. Maybe if you have too much products that are just standing, making your cupboard or fridge stagnant, maybe you could use them for some combinations. Preparing food like this, there's no recipe. If even we look at the recipes, we just kind of scan the recipe, get the idea, and do something similar, but not exactly this. No recipe, no stress, and no shopping. The way we cook may also depend not only on culture, but also on our nervous system. Are we neurodivergent or not? What brings us safety? For some of us, rules and understanding of how to do things step by step, it gives us feeling of safety. But for others, rules are limitation. It puts us into stress. So some of us, we want to feel free. We want to feel that we can swap. chickpeas to lentils, or beans to some other beans, cauliflower to broccoli. Because plants are similar, they usually go in groups, and we can switch sometimes, I don't know, sweet potatoes for carrots, and it would be almost the same or even better. But I'm not saying that one way is better than the other way. If we live in a meal household, cooking is about honoring structure, tradition, and known flavors, and it's amazing, because then the structure is preserved. If you live in an ingredient household, cooking is about experiment, adapting, and using what you have. And neither is better or worse. There's one thing though with this ingredient household cooking. We usually prefer to cook by ourselves, because when we don't really know what we are doing and other people start to ask us what we are doing, what is the next step, and is it really good what we're doing, and we don't know. we don't know, and that's okay for us, but we may trigger other people, and also other people may trigger us. So if you are in a house of ingredients and the style is more close to you, it's better to just ask people politely to leave you alone for the time when you are cooking. I hope you will bake some cookies or biscuits and share your recipe with me, or basic instruction. And thank you everyone for subscribing. That is very touching. I do it in English. I know that my English is far from perfect. I put the subtitles. I hope you understand what I'm saying. See you next time, and never forget to take picture of the food that you make.